What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk to you about SOFI. I want to go over some of the current data points, break it down on what's really moving it, and go over everything else you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So this week already it's looking pretty optimistic. We do have a ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia, ceasefire temporarily between India and Pakistan, and it looks as though that the negotiations between the States and China are going pretty a-okay. At least neither has walked out on one another, so I think that's kind of a good thing. Market has a lot of high expectations for that, and that most likely will really push the market a lot higher. That's actually what caused this right here during Friday, is just a lot of last minute jitters associated to the negotiations. But again, the play-by-play that we've been getting seems to be pretty good so far. For data points for this upcoming week, I have a lot of big ones. So on Tuesday, we have CPI. We also have PPI on Thursday, retail sales, a lot of Fed speakers throughout the week, including yours truly, Powell. And so that could be a fun time there. And then to cap it all off, on Friday, we have permits, starts, and then the Michigan consumer sentiment. That one, over the last 5 reports, 4 of them have prompted a pullback. So you might have some kind of volatility Thursday after hours as well as Friday, depending on the data, but should make for a pretty good week. Specific to SOFI, the only thing that they have lined up that we're aware of is this right here. So they are going to be participating in a fireside chat, head honcho Anthony Noto. And so this is at the JP Morgan Global Tech Media and Communications Conference. And that's something that SOFI has participated in over the last couple years. And I think if I remember correctly, usually does result in, I think on average, like a 1 to 2% green day every time there's these fireside chats. I don't know if there's any correlation with that, but nonetheless, there should be some pretty good stuff being said as per usual. So let me know your viewpoint on that in the comments below. Aside from all of that fun stuff, shorts. Shorts did return 2.01 million shares. 13.51% of the free float is being shorted. So that's what we're going into this upcoming week with. That works out to be 146.68 million shares. Cost to borrow minimum has been positive for the last 3 consecutive days. So again, you're kind of seeing some manipulation for the most part subside at the same time as shorts slowly returning. So you can kind of see that the peak was roughly around 13.85%, and slowly but surely it has been going down. You can kind of see this a little bit better of a viewpoint. Nothing substantial, so they're not returning like hundreds or like tens of millions of shares, but they are slowly returning. So I think that's kind of a good thing. There's a lot more optimism in the broader market. At the same time, the fear and greed index, we are under the greed category, meaning people's appetite for risk is on the table. Even over the weekend, we see a lot of cryptocurrencies running like hell, and that, in my opinion at least, is a good precursor on what's going to happen with the equity market. So like I said, I think there's a lot of big things coming for the broader market and potentially even SOFI, and maybe we need to start listening to Trump every time he says you need to go out and buy stocks. Maybe that is a pretty good insider type of deal that we need to kind of catch on to. But with options, with it closing above 13 on Friday, that does mean that $13 strike prices and below are in the money. So you do have 5,000 at that 12.50, 17,000 at that 3. So you might see a nice little bump up come Monday, as market makers will have to cover roughly around 2.3 million shares. There was some abnormal transactions occurring after hours on Friday, so I'm sure some of that was already covered, like this one right here, 703,000 shares, and another one right here, 110, but clearly that's not equivalent to the options. So again, you might see a nice little bump up come Monday. But aside from that, next week, so this upcoming week, is a monthly chain, so very active stuff. So you do have 12,000 at that $12 strike price, 27,000 at 13, 16,000 at 13.50, 35,000 at 14, 18,000 at 14.50, and then 97,000 at the 15. So potentially you could see things get very real. And for those individuals kind of thinking that 14 isn't on the table. If we do get a China deal and a lot of the data points, CPI and so forth, come in, even if they're in line with expectations or a little bit better, market is going to really rocket because of all that. So it's things are looking pretty good. Plus, even SOFI's technicals has been somewhat stuck in limbo between the 50 and 100-day moving average over the last little bit. So things are looking pretty a-okay. Right now, though, with it at 13.18, trading between this R1 and the pivot, so 11.87 is going to be a strong support, and I don't really see that being touched regardless of any scenario. The only way I actually do see that being touched is if maybe the negotiations with China actually do escalate and we have China walk out, for instance, and say, screw you, the States, or something like that. That's the only way I feel like the market would really panic like crazy. But I think given the circumstances and momentum, you do see most likely that 14.13 being touched probably in the first couple of trading days, most likely Tuesday, and then as well 15.52 and 17.78 are going to be the other kind of resistance levels just to kind of take note of. On the actual chart, no recent analyst ratings. Most likely there will be a couple still coming down the pipeline. Maybe they're just waiting for more of a calmer macro standpoint. If there is a deal between China and the States, anticipate a lot of analysts to start giving positive re-ratings across the board. So again, that could really help the broader market. But as I mentioned, SOFI is just stuck between that 50 and 100-day moving average and has been for the last week and a half. So most likely this week, we will be early on testing that 100-day moving average. So that's sitting at 13.80. And if it does break above that, then I most likely anticipate roughly around that $17 range to be hit very, very fast, similar to kind of how it did break out in kind of November/December. So let me know your viewpoint on SOFI. Where do you see things going? And actually, to be fully honest, I'd like to hear from a lot of the bears. Given the circumstances, what is bearish? Other than maybe the China-US deal falling through, is there any overwhelming bearish points that maybe I am not really looking at? Because as far as from my standpoint, I see a significant kind of greater upside given every data point. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just, again, being narrow-minded and not really seeing one viewpoint, but I do see higher highs coming with SOFI, and not just them, but the broader market as well. So let me know your viewpoint on SOFI. Hopefully everyone's having an amazing weekend. Happy Mother's Day to all of those that celebrate out there. And then one final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you are looking for good buy signals on stocks, options, crypto, many of which have been absolutely on point. Even called out Ethereum, saying that it was going to go up 20%. Exactly 15 hours before it did go through its crazy run at the tail end of last week. So a lot of big hits like that. Just, yeah, worthwhile to pop over there and take a look. Link in the description below and also the comments. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.